Saturday morning cartoons were supposed to be safe, bright colors, simple morals, easy endings. But buried inside the 1980s schedule were animated shows that didn't just scare kids, they confronted them. Death was permanent, authority was cruel. Survival came with guilt. These weren't cartoons designed to comfort. They were warnings in disguise. Number 8. Watership Down, 1980s. Few animated stories ever made it onto children's television, carrying the emotional weight of Watership Down. While best known as a film, its repeated television broadcasts throughout the 1980s placed imagery of mass death, political oppression, and existential despair directly into living rooms at breakfast time. This was not adventure. This was survival horror, drawn with soft lines and wide eyes. The story does not treat death as a lesson. It treats it as an inevitability. Rabbits suffocate underground. They are ripped apart by predators. Entire warrens are exterminated by humans without ceremony or remorse. The villain is not a monster, but a system, a totalitarian society where obedience matters more than life itself. For young viewers raised on tidy morals, Watership Down offered something far more disturbing: the idea that the world is indifferent to innocence. What makes it especially dark is its refusal to protect the audience emotionally. Characters die suddenly and without heroic framing. There is no triumphant music, no reassurance that things will be okay. The survivors carry trauma forward. Leadership is portrayed as a burden soaked in guilt. Courage does not guarantee safety. It merely delays loss. The 1980s broadcast stripped away context but kept the horror intact. Parents often assumed rabbits meant harmless storytelling. Instead, children were exposed to imagery that mirrored war, authoritarianism, and genocide, themes most adults struggled to process, let alone kids. It wasn't just frightening, it was existential. Watership Down endures because it never lied. It told children the truth far earlier than most were ready to hear. Survival has a cost, freedom is fragile, and safety is never guaranteed. That honesty is exactly why it lingered, and why so many viewers remember it not as a cartoon, but as their first confrontation with mortality. Number 7. The Animals of Farthing Wood. At first glance, The Animals of Farthing Wood looks like the gentlest show imaginable. Talking woodland creatures. A journey to safety. A soothing narrator. But episode by episode, it quietly became one of the most emotionally brutal animated series ever broadcast to children. Unlike fantasy cartoons where danger resets, this world kept score. Animals didn't just die, they suffered. They starved. They were crushed by vehicles, poisoned by humans, torn apart by predators in scenes that refused to cut away. And once a character died, they were gone forever. No resurrection, no magic fix. Their absence became part of the story's emotional landscape. What made it uniquely traumatic was how it framed morality. Good choices didn't always lead to survival. Bad choices didn't always result in punishment. Sometimes the most innocent characters died simply because the world was hostile. The show portrayed nature not as nurturing, but as indifferent, and humanity as an often unseen force of destruction. There was also an unrelenting sense of dread. Each episode carried the expectation that someone would not make it. Children didn't tune in asking who would win. They asked who would survive. The slow reduction of the group mirrored war attrition more than children's storytelling. Unlike Watership Down, which felt like a warning, Farthing Wood felt like a slow execution. It normalized grief. It forced viewers to sit with loss rather than rush past it. Many adults later described it as their first experience with ongoing narrative trauma, learning to care deeply while knowing it might hurt. The Animals of Farthing Wood crossed a line most children's television refuses to approach. It trusted young viewers with the truth that life is fragile and fairness is not guaranteed. And for an entire generation, that truth arrived far too early, wrapped in fur, leaves, and absolute emotional devastation. Number 6. Ulysses 31. Ulysses 31 was never interested in comforting its audience. From its opening moments, the series establishes a universe that is vast, empty, and cruel. This was not space as a playground, it was space as punishment. Gods existed, but they were not benevolent. They were distant, vengeful, and casually destructive, treating human lives as footnotes in cosmic grudges. The premise alone is bleak. Ulysses defies the gods to save his son, and for that act of compassion, he is cursed. His crew is frozen in time. His journey becomes endless. Home is no longer a destination. Every episode reinforces the same quiet truth. Survival does not mean escape. It simply means continuing. What made the show especially disturbing for children was its emotional isolation. Characters drift through abandoned planets, dead civilizations, and silent ruins. Entire species are implied to have vanished. Technology fails. Allies disappear. Victory is often temporary and deeply unsatisfying. There is no reset button. The curse never lifts. The gods never apologize. The tone is relentlessly somber. Music echoes instead of lifts. Dialogue is sparse and reflective. Even action scenes feel restrained, as if violence itself is exhausting. This wasn't heroism as power fantasy. It was heroism as endurance. The lesson wasn't how to win, but how to keep going when winning is impossible, psychologically. On Ulysses 31 presented children with adult concepts rarely addressed in animation: inherited guilt, parental failure, and the idea that moral choices can make life harder rather than better. Ulysses is a good man, and that goodness costs him everything. That contradiction sits at the core of the series. For many viewers, this was their first exposure to existential science fiction. It didn't scare through monsters or gore. It scared through loneliness, through silence, through the idea that the universe might not care if you survive at all. And that is a far heavier message than most cartoons ever dared to deliver. Number 5. The Mysterious Cities of Gold. On paper, the Mysterious Cities of Gold looked educational. History, geography, cultural exploration. But beneath that noble framing lay a story steeped in conquest, annihilation, and moral ambiguity. This was a children's cartoon that repeatedly confronted the destruction of entire civilizations and treated it as tragic rather than triumphant. The series follows lost cities powered by ancient technology so dangerous it borders on apocalyptic. Each discovery carries consequences. Knowledge is not empowering, it is destabilizing. Civilizations are wiped out not by monsters, but by curiosity, ambition, and misuse of power. The message is clear and uncomfortable. Progress often arrives soaked in blood. Unlike simpler adventure cartoons, the villains here are not easily dismissed. Imperial forces mirror real historical atrocities. Indigenous cultures are portrayed as victims of invasion rather than obstacles to be overcome. Genocide is not implied, it is acknowledged. Entire peoples vanish. Their cities crumble. Their histories are erased. For young viewers, this was a radical reframing of exploration stories. There is no clean victory. Every revelation feels like uncovering a grave. The golden technology does not bring peace, it brings extinction. Even the heroes are complicit simply by being present. The show's tone reinforces this gravity. Long stretches are quiet and contemplative. Characters question their role in unfolding disasters. Adults lie, authorities manipulate. Number 4. The Real Ghostbusters. The Real Ghostbusters looked like a toy commercial with a punchline, bright colors, slime gags, catchphrases. But underneath that marketable surface was one of the most psychologically disturbing animated series ever aired to children. And this show did not just flirt with horror, it embedded it into everyday life and treated terror as a constant ambient condition. Episodes regularly dealt with possession, body horror, and loss of identity. Characters were erased from existence. Minds were invaded, reality bent without warning. Villains were not simply monsters to be punched and trapped. Many were cosmic entities beyond comprehension, ancient gods, extra-dimensional beings, and manifestations of pure malevolence. The show repeatedly implied that humanity survives only because these forces are temporarily distracted. What truly unsettled young viewers was how casually the series treated damnation. Hell was not metaphorical, it was literal. Characters were dragged into other dimensions, screaming. Innocent bystanders were tormented or transformed. And unlike most cartoons, these events were not reversed neatly by the end of the episode. Trauma lingered. Characters remembered what happened to them. The writing often leaned into existential horror. There were episodes where reality itself was revealed to be fragile, where death was permanent, where the Ghostbusters didn't really win, they merely delayed something worse. Even the humor felt nervous, like whistling past a graveyard. Number 3. Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea is one of the most emotionally alienating children's cartoons ever produced. It is slow. It is melancholic, and it is soaked in the quiet despair of a world already past saving. While other shows raced from battle to battle, Spartacus drifted, like a dream you can't wake up from. Set in a subterranean civilization called Arcadia, the series centers on a society in slow collapse. Resources are failing, leadership is fractured, hope is fragile. Characters speak in hushed tones about destiny, sacrifice, and extinction. The overarching question is never whether the heroes will win, but whether survival is even meaningful anymore. Children watching this were confronted with concepts rarely explored in animation: cultural decay, inherited guilt, and the burden of leadership in a dying world. Arcadia is not threatened by a single villain. It is threatened by time, by entropy, by the consequences of past decisions that cannot be undone. Visually, the show reinforces its sadness. Colors are muted. Architecture feels ancient and crumbling. Characters move slowly, as if weighed down by the knowledge they carry. Even moments of action feel restrained, almost reluctant. A victory rarely brings joy, only temporary relief. What makes Spartacus especially unsettling is its emotional honesty. Number 2. Mighty Orbots. Mighty Orbots arrived dressed like a colorful robot spectacle, but beneath its polished anime-influenced animation was a cartoon steeped in Cold War paranoia and mechanized fatalism. This was not a story about flashy heroics. It was a story about escalation, surveillance, and a future where conflict never truly ends. The show's central premise already carried weight far beyond its target audience. Humanity survives under constant threat from a shadowy villain whose motivations feel less like cartoon evil and more like ideological annihilation. Orbots are deployed not as symbols of hope, but as last resort weapons. Every episode reinforces the idea that peace is temporary and vigilance is permanent. What made Mighty Orbots unsettling was its militarized tone. Cities are routinely destroyed. Civilian populations are endangered without sentimental framing. Losses occur off-screen but are clearly implied. The heroes don't celebrate victory. They regroup, repair, and prepare for the next inevitable attack. This is war presented as routine. The animation style sharpened that severity. Characters moved with mechanical precision. Action scenes were clean and relentless rather than playful. Even the transformation sequences felt industrial, emphasizing assembly and function over joy. The Orbots themselves were less personalities and more tools, raising uncomfortable questions about autonomy and sacrifice. Number 1. Bionic 6. Bionic 6 looked like a wholesome family superhero cartoon, a household of heroes, bright costumes, unity, and teamwork. But hidden beneath that sitcom-friendly exterior was a surprisingly dark meditation on identity, dehumanization, and the cost of turning people into weapons. The premise alone carried disturbing implications. A family survives an accident and is rebuilt with bionic enhancements. Their powers are not a blessing. They are a transformation forced by circumstance. From that moment on, they are no longer fully human, yet never allowed to forget their humanity. The show repeatedly asks an unspoken question: what happens when your body no longer belongs entirely to you? Villains in Bionic 6 were rarely simple monsters. Many were reflections of technological obsession, fractured identity, or scientific arrogance. The central antagonist was less threatening because of brute force and more unsettling because of ideology. He represented the cold logic of progress without ethics, a mirror of what the heroes might become if they abandon empathy. Episodes frequently explored loss of control. Characters were hacked, overridden, or manipulated. Free will was fragile. Technology could betray you. Children watching were exposed to a subtle but powerful fear that intelligence and advancement might strip away choice rather than expand it. What elevated the darkness was the family dynamic. These weren't lone heroes. They were parents and children navigating trauma together. Arguments weren't just about tactics, but about responsibility, guilt, and fear. The show acknowledged emotional consequences instead of resetting relationships every episode. Visually, the contrast amplified the unease. Cheerful colors clashed with heavy themes. Domestic scenes were interrupted by existential threats. The ordinary and the inhuman collided constantly, making it difficult to fully relax into the fantasy. Bionic 6 earns the top spot because it smuggled some of the most adult anxieties of the 1980s into a children's time slot: fear of technology, erosion of identity, and the idea that survival might come at the cost of self. It wasn't just dark for kids, it was quietly unsettling for anyone paying attention. These cartoons didn't traumatize by accident. They reflected a decade grappling with war, technology, extinction, and uncertainty, and they trusted children with truths most adults prefer to soften.